Good evening. Can I welcome you to this cabinet meeting of the 15th of June? Just firstly, before I start, I've got apologies. The leader of Council Alambritis is unfortunately unable to be here this evening as his mother-in-law has unfortunately been hospitalised, and Councillor Allison, the deputy, he has had an operation today and is unable to attend. Do we have any further apologies? I think everyone is here. We move on then to item number 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, we move on to item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2019. Agreed. I'm going to take a variation in the agenda item. The first item I'm going to take is the Children's and Young People's Plan 2019 and 2023. That will be followed by the Worsfold House agenda items from speakers, and then we'll progress to the rest of the agenda. So can I invite Councillor Kelly Ford to introduce the report?
So, for many years, Merton's Children's Trust has brought together key partners to set joint priorities for Merton's children and young people. But when we started to create our plan for 19 through to 2023, we decided to take a slightly different tack. And as a demonstration of our commitment to the children and young people across Merton, we handed the consultation and the construction of the plan over to young residents themselves, as led by our young inspectors in the audience. We've got Martin, and Toby, I understand, couldn't be here this evening and is very sad about that, so I'm sure we'll make that up to him at some point. But the Children's Trust is ambitious for all children and young people across the borough, and by listening to what those young residents care about, this plan focuses in on their priorities, demonstrates how we as a trust can achieve those aims, and we make sure that it is in a format which is engaging and accessible for them. So this plan is going to be monitored by the Trust Board, and our progress will be scrutinised by our young residents to make sure that they hold us accountable for our actions towards fulfilling their priorities. I'd like to thank the excellent work of our young inspectors and the rest of the young residents who worked with the youth participation team, and also to the youth participation team for supporting them throughout this. I hope you have all had the opportunity to read the report itself. It is very clear and engaging, with plenty of accessible information about what those young residents want and what we're going to do to fulfil them. So I hope that this Cabinet will be able to endorse the findings of that report, and whilst it's still a work in progress, there will be more to follow on this shortly.
Thank you. And I understand Martin Miranda-Otello, one of the young inspectors, wishes to address. Do you wish to come forward, Martin? Thank you. Take a seat. Feel free to.
So today I wanted to share a little bit about good evening. My name's Martin Miranda. I'm one of the young inspectors that was involved in the development of the Children and Young People's Plan 2019 to 2023. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process. The main difference is as the added value that we've been able to gain by adding young people into the process. So the process of writing the document allowed Toby Podger, who's the other young inspector, to draft policy on behalf of young people in the borough by working collaboratively with the planning, policy and partnerships team and the Children's Trust. The main difference between the new Children and Young People's Plan and the previous document is that this one is graphic-led and it's easy to read. So when we first came into the project, they told us to that simplify it because they felt like it was too long. So for this CYPP, what we did was bring it down from 64 pages to 13 pages. And that's because we wanted it to be universally accessible and make sure that children themselves, students, parents can read the document just as well as professionals can. And so this was one of the main aims that we wanted to have with this plan. Another difference is the inclusion of young people's voices from a variety of different channels. So the first was from young inspectors, was me and Toby, who worked with professionals to draft the document. The second was with the borough-wide consultation, which was mostly to schools, and we gave the 1,287 young residents the opportunity to voice their opinions, their concerns, and their aspirations for young people in the borough. So the third was consulting the youth parliament. So every time we did a draft, we got the youth parliament to vote on it, to give us some feedback, and so we did that twice until they approved the document that we've submitted to you now. Right, we also had the opportunity to be involved in Visioning Day. So this took place in late March, and this gave us the opportunity to see a glimpse of how different stakeholders interact to form a partnership for children and young people. I believe during the Visioning Day we presented the results of all of our consultations, so you have to think that it was 1,287 residents, but each questionnaire had 30 questions. So therefore there was a lot of analysis that was kind of like brought together. And we wanted to present a lot of these concerns and issues that young people have and their opinions before this children and people plan was sort of displayed. Right. So one of the main outcomes of the Visioning Day was the slogan, "My Family, My Future, My Merton," which I think encompasses our connections with my family, our aspirations with my future, and the place we all share in common, which is Merton. So I think it's a very good slogan for us. Right, and the final part of the policy draft, it was led by Toby Kodja, Malini Hozu, and the head of policy planning and partnerships at the time, Sharon Rugby. They presented the most final draft to the Children's Trust Board in April, where the plan was assessed and discussed among directors and other stakeholders. I just also wanted to thank Kelly Brown, the cabinet member of Children's Services, throughout the project, because she helped us throughout the project, and she helped us in drafting the forward for the plan. And of course I can't forget the help from Rachel Wardell, the director of Children's Schools and Families, who was very keen to listen to our recommendations and to guide us in the right direction. So yeah, thank you for your time today and for listening to our recommendations. Thank you.
And thank you for your contribution to Cabinet. It's greatly appreciated. Does the Director want to add any words?
Very few words, because I think it's been very ably said by other people, but just for anyone who is concerned that the plan may be a little thin, there is action planning that sits underneath this plan, and the detailed action plan takes place at the Children's Trust Board this Wednesday. So we're workshopping the detailed actions that sit under the plan. So I'm delighted that we've got something so concise and so readable. If anyone's worried that that will be difficult to translate into action, you can be reassured that the detail is on its way. Thank you.
Cabinet members have any questions? Councillor Macauley.
I just want to make a comment. I think it is important that we've given the opportunity to young people to play a part, especially in the consultation process when we did the survey. And I was very keen to see what the outcome of the young people's views were. And it has all been taken into consideration, because we do feel that young people play a pivotal role in our community here in Merton, and as cabinet member for community ownership of community in the role. I find it very interesting when I looked at all the things that was raised by younger people in the role, and I think we are the future generation, and we have to listen to what you're saying and then act, and not just tick boxes. So I applaud what has been done. Thank you.
Just make a comment as well.
Thank you.
Just like to applaud them as well for taking, well, for maybe Rachel and Kelly for helping them to take part in it as to what they've done and the results they've come up with. I like this slogan actually, my family, my future, my Merton, especially when it comes from themselves and it's young people and it's their future we're talking about and in Merton. So all in all, well done.
Thank you. Are the recommendations agreed by Cabinet?
Yes, agreed.
And thank you again. We'll move on to the next item I intend to take, which is item 16, disposal of Worsfold House, Mitcham. I'm going to invite first two representatives from Merton.TV to address the panel. Estamanos Lacey and Sarah Henley, and I understand that with a total of 3 minutes shared between them. So if you could read. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Henley. I've been on the board of Merton still since it began. Sorry.
Yeah, just all that time. Thank you. If you can start again, sorry about that. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Henley. I've been on the still board since it began 10 years ago. I find it very good. It gets me out of bed and it gets me to have something to do. And I'm also a member, so that means if I've got a problem I can talk about it. And my worries are that if we get thrown out of the building, we won't have accessible parking and we won't have accessible toilets because they aren't pretty big.
Dear Councillors, since starting as a steering group in 2008, Merton has grown into the only user-led and disability deaf people's organisation in Merton. We have provided advice and advocacy, benefit claims, community care and hate crime services to hundreds of disabled Merton residents. Our work has aimed to and succeeded in increasing their independence, well-being and financial support. Many of these people would otherwise struggle to use services from other organisations due to access issues, as evidenced by the feedback surveys we carried out. Personally speaking, Emerson has given me the opportunity to volunteer and take part in various projects. This has helped me grow in confidence and I have now been a trustee for almost 2 years. We understand the need for housing in Merton, as well as the financial strain the council is under. I believe the new development should consider resident well-being and the existing services that facilitate it. MSO sees as a wonderful opportunity for a community-led code-sign process, resulting in a mixed residential and community space. This would ensure that Merton's deaf and disabled residents can continue to access our valuable services, as well as have a forum to have a say about issues that matter to them. We are one of a number of organisations that made Worsfold House their home, turning this formerly abandoned building into a vibrant hub of activity and contributing greatly to the borough. MSIL hopes that Merton Council will do all it can for organisations that look after, so that we continue to call Merton our home. Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Just to say ultimately about the fantastic work with young people in the Cllr trust. It would be a real shame for our work to be put in jeopardy because of building our premises. We have been looking for some time for anybody's government being aware of the possibility of the site being developed, and there isn't anywhere fully accessible within our living space. And one of the options what we're having to look at is actually to be based outside in the borough, but obviously still providing services within the borough, but that wouldn't be efficient or effective. So, as I say, having heard about that fantastic work with young people, we should look at what the options are within premises, but also for us to follow that sort of law and expand on what we've been doing so far.
Thank you for your contribution to the panel here tonight. It is greatly appreciated. I'll now ask Chris, the Director, to come in.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll speak to both reports, if that's okay,
Yes.
because we have both a public and a confidential.
Just before I go on, can I just obviously, in terms of, if we want to refer to the private report, we will need to go into private session, so we can refer to the public report, so we can have as much in public as possible. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, because I don't intend to talk about any confidential elements in the exempt report. Merely to, I suppose, explain the purpose of the proposed disposal, and then to pick up on the substantive matters around the equalities impact, which has been well set out by attendees this evening. So firstly, the purpose of this proposed disposal is to facilitate and accelerate the regeneration proposals that Cllr has brought forward, and for which planning permission has already been granted in relation to Ravensbury, Highpath and Eastfields Estate. And what that's identified is there is a need to provide some detached housing in order to ensure that particularly Eastfields can move forward as quickly as we would wish. And the positive benefits of that would be that we would get the regeneration more quickly and the supply of decent housing more quickly, and that's a good thing. So we, in consultation with planning, bring forward this proposal to members to dispose of the site, and to dispose of it at best consideration. And without going into the details in the confidential report, you'll see that's made up of capital receipt, but also additional nomination rights, which when valued exceed the valuation that we've given to this site. So it does represent best consideration, and there are significant positive impacts and benefits that flow from that. But I draw members' attention in particular to the equalities impact assessment, because members have a duty to consider the impact that any decision of this kind might have, and to weigh that up, and to ensure that you're giving due regard. And the way we do that is through an impact assessment, and you have that paper in front of you. And that identifies that as well as the positive benefits that I've described with regard to regeneration and affordable housing, there are also potentially negative impacts, because Worsfold House currently let to Evolve and sublet to a number of groups, including Cllr, supports a number of groups who are in the Equalities Act have protected characteristics, and that's set out in detail in the impact assessment. And we recognise that some of those impacts may not be mitigated, but we are doing everything we can to work with Cllr and other occupiers of worse hospitals in order to seek to identify alternative accommodation. In terms of timing, we don't expect this impact until November at the very earliest. The site is still subject to planning application and Clarion and the timing of their works, if you were to agree this recommendation, are still unclear. So November would be the very earliest, and we would seek to work, as we have done already, work with those groups in order to identify alternate accommodation where we can and to assist them in any way reasonably possible, because we recognise the excellent work that's done and we don't wish to undermine that. So I draw members' attention to the EIA then and recommend the report because I believe that the impact is proportionate to the outcomes that members are seeking to achieve. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll come in as the cabinet member for regeneration. I think this is very important in terms of the delivery of homes. It would provide 60 units to relocate existing owners and house owners from the Eastfields estate into new homes, but also as well expedites the delivery of the regenerations of Eastfields. Regeneration is one of the biggest priorities facing this council. We have a huge housing crisis here in Merton. We need to deliver more homes, but also as well we have to recognise that housing need in the borough, having 10,000 people on the waiting list. It also will as well in terms of homeless accommodation, disposal and subsequent redevelopment, will obviously help provide much needed housing, reduce the need for temporary accommodation, and provide permanent homes. It's very important that we do have more permanent homes in the borough, but also as well in terms of the decants. Eastfields, Hyde Park and Ravensbury are going to go through a number of phases. This specifically relates to Eastfields where the decant, that's the redevelopment of the estate and the re-provision of housing, it will enable that to take place and also allow more nominations to be available to the council. I think in relation to Cllr, I think obviously they have made very valid points, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for your contribution. It's essential that we as a cabinet assist you in terms of your relocation as an organisation, as I understand it, who have given you notice to leave by the 30th of November. I think it's recognised the work that you carry out and it's commended by the authority as well. And I think obviously in terms of our recommendations, if we also add a forth to assist in any way possible the relocation of existing tenants who will be impacted by the disposal of Worsfold House, including Cllr, because we do want to work with you. We do recognise that as well, and it's in terms of ensuring that we can progress these things in terms of the next stages going forward. Does members of the Cabinet have any questions they would like to ask? Councillor Vice.
Chair, not a question, just a comment. I just wanted to echo your words. I've worked closely with Merton over the past few years in my cabinet role. I think it is right we recognise the contribution they make across the borough, and also that not all accommodation will be suitable for them given the makeup of their membership. It will need to be accessible. So I have already had discussions with the Director of Community and Housing and Environment and Region, and I will continue to do so to ensure we do, as you say, all we can to find them alternative accommodation.
Councillor Macauley.
Can I just ask please whether the linking of the three estates and Ravensbury, Hyde Park and Eastfield, will that unlock, by getting rid of Worsfold House, would that unlock the higher benefit for a stronger and larger scheme in terms of what's going to happen to the people who are Worsfold House? Because just need a bit of clarification.
So it essentially unlocks and accelerates the scheme that's been agreed at planning committee. So it won't be a larger scheme, but it will be the scheme that members have agreed and signed off the plan. And it allows the deacons to then, almost like a game of Tetris, allow the regeneration to be facilitated. And we've been discussing with Clarion for some time now how we unlock this. And this site allows that opportunity to make sure that the scheme can be delivered as quickly as we want it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the addition of the recommendation to assist the relocation of the existing tenants. We've heard tonight the good work that Cllr does and the extra efforts that should go into supporting them in finding a new accessible space with both accessible parking and toilets and that sort of thing. I also think that there are a couple of units within there that work with under my portfolio, including things like blessed education, just learn, and talk off the record. I note that when in section 7 it says that you haven't had responses back from some of those. Are you going to be in a position to go back out to them and make sure that they understand what's happening to them and the alternative provision that's available and any support that we can provide? Because I think that's really important.
Yes, we certainly will. We'll make every effort to try to contact them and provide assistance that we think we can support.
Thank you. So my additional recommendation is to assist with the relocation of existing tenants and helping them to find suitable alternative accommodation. Subject to that amendment, are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. We now move back onto the agenda, and I'm going to take item 4, which is reference to sustainable communities overview scrutiny panel on the public health, air quality, sustainable transport, and number 5, emissions, public health and air quality, a review of parking charges. So I'm going to invite the Chair of the Sustainable Communities Panel, Councillor Irons, to address the panel. Councillor Irons.
So thank you very much for having me. This is my first cabinet meeting, so forgive me if I run along a bit too much. Please cut me short, Chair. We met on the 27th of June to discuss the report that came to panel about the increase in parking charges and the results of the consultation as well. We heard from we had five representations from residents, from a councillor, and from Wimbledon. There was a very, very strong feeling that, everybody completely agrees that air quality is something that the council should take seriously, and everybody agrees that it's something we should all focus on. However, everybody didn't seem to agree that parking charges was the right way to do that. There was also the feeling that maybe the council hadn't been as ambitious as it could be in its approach to tackling air quality, and that informed one of our recommendations. So, having reviewed the report, the Equalities Impact Assessment relied very much on the Blue Badge scheme to help those with mobility issues. And whilst that is fine for people with disabilities, it doesn't necessarily cover off residents who are elderly and need a little bit more help to get around. And given that we were unsuccessful in our bid for the Access for All funding, and that many of Merton's stations remain step-free, the report made suggestions about working with TfL, but there were no clear plans about how that would happen. So we would like that to be firmed up and a proper plan about how working with TfL to make our transport step-free could happen. Also wanted a little bit more evidence around the link between increasing charges and decreasing emissions. There was additional evidence there, but we felt that that could still be firmed up a bit more. We welcome the opportunity to review it again in 6 to 12 months after implementation, but there needs to be a very clear measurement structure. The report doesn't seem to make any suggestions about how we can measure the impact of this. So would it be things around the uptake of electric vehicle permits, maybe a decrease in traditional parking permits, an increase in public transport, and the impact of does air quality improve at all? Finally, back to that idea of us being a bit more ambitious as a council, it would be great if the council could do more around having better streets more attractive to walking and cycling, and taking an example from councils such as Waltham Forest and Kingston, who have done a lot of work around upgrading their streets and the roads and cycling networks to encourage people to move to more sustainable transport.
Thank you. I'll now allow Councillor Byers to come and introduce the report, but also as well respond to Councillor Hines and Sustainable Communities panel. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by thanking officers for all the work that has gone into this over the past 10 months or so, particularly Ben Stevens and Kath James, but also the wider team from both Environment and Regen and Public Health. Can I also thank everyone who took part in the consultation process in recent months, and can I thank Councillor Ironson's Sustainable Communities Scrutiny panel for their work. I'll address the points set out in the scrutiny reference shortly, but I first want to touch on 3 of the more prominent points that came out during the consultation process and some of the debate around these proposals, namely the rationale for the proposed parking charges, the difference in the proposed level of charges in different parts of the borough, and then to put the policy in the context of some of the wider measures that the council is undertaking to tackle poor air quality. So firstly, just to reflect on the rationale for the proposed change in charges. Tackling poor air quality has been a focus of this administration, and in the consultation one of the points that came across quite clearly was that a majority of respondents do agree that the council does have a role to do so. Cabinet first considered this matter last November, and since then we've seen the issue of poor air quality continue to rise up the political and public agenda, with a clean air campaign by the Times and all of the activity around Extinction Rebellion resulting in a number of local authorities, including ourselves, declaring a climate emergency and committing to reducing our pollution. The Air Quality Action Plan that we adopted in 2018 contained some 70 recommendations, and we're making good progress on all of those. And it's important to remember that one of the recommendations contained in the Air Quality Action Plan was to review parking charges with a view to using them to address poor air quality. So that has always formed part of our plans to tackle poor air quality. When Cabinet considered this first in November last year, the paper provided the context of the link between poor air quality and vehicle emissions. In Merton, nearly 60% of NO2 emissions that originate within the borough are attributable to road transport. So whilst the Air Quality Action Plan does contain a range of measures, it is important to recognise that without tackling emissions from road transport, we will not meaningfully tackle emissions within the borough. As has been discussed on previous occasions, the Council has a limited number of levers to influence this, so it is really important that we maximise the opportunities from the levers that we do have. There are broadly 2 ways in which we can tackle emissions through road transport. The first is to reduce the use of vehicles and encourage people to travel more sustainably and actively by foot, bike or public transport. And the second is to encourage a shift away from the most polluting vehicles towards cleaner ones. The introduction of the diesel levy 2 years ago, which we're currently reviewing, sought to do the latter, whilst this policy seeks to address the former. It's also important to note that this policy seeks to do more than just improve air quality, and again in the November Cabinet paper, the wider public health benefits were set out very clearly, including safer roads, healthier places, and more active and less sedentary lifestyles. Secondly, I wanted to touch on the suggestion that the policy is unfair because different parts of the borough have different charging rates, and a suggestion that instead of flat rates should be used across the borough. The mechanism that's proposed to be used is the PTAL rating of an area, how easily accessible public transport is. As the aim of the policy is to encourage people to travel more sustainably, the PTAL rating, I would suggest, is an appropriate tool to achieve this. A similar system is used in planning applications, where development in high PTAL areas will often be expected to be permit-free. Merton as a borough has very good public transport links, and this was something that came out of the recent resident survey. However, public transport accessibility is considerably better in the west and central parts of the borough than it is in the east. As such, the proposed charges in those parts of the borough are higher, reflecting their higher PTAL ratings. Following the consultation, the PTAL ratings have been looked at again, and several zones in Wimbledon have been reclassified after their accessibility was re-looked at. The third point I wanted to touch upon was something that came up from a number of respondents to the consultation and attendees to the events that we spoke at, and indeed from Councillor Irons. And that's the point that whilst tackling poor air quality is seen as a priority, there are perhaps other things that people feel the council should be doing. I think it's important to recognise that this policy is just one measure that the council is pursuing to tackle poor air quality. I've already touched on the Air Quality Action Plan, which included some 70 recommendations, and specifically in relation to emissions from road transport. I would note the council is doing to tackle idling, which I've recently written to all councillors about. The work currently being commissioned to look at the case for a clean air zone in Wimbledon Town Centre, and the ongoing work with TfL to encourage cleaner buses. And the leader will shortly be writing to TfL to press for more urgency on this point. The proposed parking charges are therefore part of a wider package of measures that the council is pursuing, and I, along with officers, are very receptive and open to hearing any suggestions for additional policies we should explore. But we should understand them not as an either-or, but as complementary measures towards the goal of tackling poor air quality across the borough. I'll touch briefly on the reference that was received from Scrutiny, and again I'd like to thank Councillor Irons and members of the Scrutiny panel for reviewing the proposals in such detail a couple of weeks ago. In regard to public transport accessibility, officers do regularly discuss these matters in their meetings with TfL, and I'll ask the Director to say something about this when he speaks shortly. At Council last week, the Cabinet Member for Women and Equality spoke about her focus on step-free access across the borough, so it is something that is being looked at. It is worth noting, though, as I've touched on already, that residents in the borough do rate highly the public transport we have, as was evidenced in the recent annual resident survey. In regard to the potential impact on older people, a comprehensive equalities impact assessment has been undertaken. Following the concerns raised during the consultation process, the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Housing and Transport and I have asked officers to look at what other boroughs have in place. Across London there are a variety of different schemes, and I would propose that, should Cabinet approve the recommendations this evening, this is something that is kept under review and assessed as part of the review that we have already committed to. In regards to additional evidence, significant more work has been done since the initial Cabinet papers in November and December last year, and the Scrutiny meeting that first considered this at the beginning of the year. There has been a lot of talk about nudge and price elasticity, and I think it's important to accept that this is partly a process of trial and error, and that it might not necessarily achieve the aims of the policy as currently proposed, which is why it will need to be reviewed and potentially tweaked in due course, much in the way that we're currently going through with the diesel levy. In regard to measurement of success, ultimately we will want to assess improved outcomes such as reduced air pollution and improved public health, but we do need to recognise that these things take time to flow through. In the shorter term, it will predominantly be similar to the criteria that are being used at present to review the diesel levy, notably the number of permits issued and parking permits. However, I do think there are a number of good suggestions made at the Scrutiny meeting a couple of weeks ago in regard to using TfL data to track public transport usage, so we can incorporate these to monitor how people's behaviour and modes of travel are changing. Finally, in regards to sustainable travel, there is a lot of work underway already, including a proposed expansion of floating car clubs that Cabinet will be considering later this evening, work exploring the feasibility of a doctor's bike scheme in the borough, and ongoing improvements to cycleways. So can I end by thanking officers again for all of the work they've done on this over the past 10 months. I think it is right that we look to tackle poor air quality across the borough, and if we are serious about doing that, then we need to look at measures to reduce emissions from road transport. As such, I commend this report and its recommendations to the Council.
Thank you. Stuart, do you want to add anything?
If I could, yes, just particularly to start with the equalities issues that arise out of this report, and then touch upon the matters Councillor Byers referred to with regard to work with TfL. So just as I did with the Worsfold House report, just to touch upon the equalities issues that arise. First, to say that during the consultation period and the subsequent scrutiny, there's rightly been a significant focus on equalities and the impact on certain groups. And I wanted to remind members about the public sector equality duty, so there's no doubt that this has been considered when making a decision on rewards. All public bodies must prevent discrimination and have due regard to the need to consider and apply fairness and equality in carrying out their functions, especially in making decisions or policies. Merton, like other public bodies, discharges this function in the main through an equalities impact assessment, a copy of which accompanied this report, and the final amended version is appended to the report and papers this evening. This equality impact assessment shows that comprehensive consultation took place, followed by careful consideration of how the policy might affect different equality groups, and the EIA sets out a detailed profile of Merton as a place. The EIA looks at all protected characteristic groups and assesses the impact of the proposed changes. There are both positive and negative impacts identified by the EIA. Positive impacts for all groups in terms of improved air quality and public health as a potential outcome, and some negative impacts for some groups, disability, socio-economic as well as pregnancy and maternity. However, in light of the mitigation set out in the EIA, the level of impact is assessed as likely to be low, and the Council considers that the impact is proportionate to the legitimate aim sought to be achieved by the policy. It's worth bearing in mind that the protected characteristic groups aren't mutually exclusive categories, so there is some interplay between them, and the EIA identified no potential negative impact to elderly people within the age category per se, but did identify that elderly people are more likely to be infirm, have mobility problems, require care, or have a disability more than other age groups. And this has been properly addressed under the disability section of the report, alongside the mitigations already in place for the plan. So I refer members to the Improvement Action Plan, section 5 in the EIA, which sets out the actions and the timescales proposed to be undertaken. This includes arrangements such as free parking for blue badge holders in permit or disabled bays, when displaying a blue badge, the opportunity for dedicated disabled bays to be provided on the public park, and the availability of free carers permits, a free permit which can be displayed in any vehicle when the blue badge holder or a person with a title by needing regular care is being visited. Residents over 60 years of age qualify for free public transport in London, and whilst it's accepted that some of our train stations are not fully stepped through, we shall continue to lobby Network Rail and TfL for this to be improved borough-wide. This was also identified as an issue in the pregnancy and maternity category, where a clear action was identified to continue working with partners and lobbying TfL. If agreed, we shall keep this policy and its impacts under review and consult specifically with representatives of these groups to assess ongoing impact and to consider further mitigation. Members should note that the Equalities Impact Assessment, the impact is assessed as low, and we do believe the benefits from the proposed scheme outweigh the negatives, and the impact is proportionate to the end sought to be achieved by this policy. So then just moving on to the work with TfL and others. As Councillor Byers has said, we do see this policy complementary to action and work that we will take to improve public transport. And we meet with TfL in particular on a regular basis to pursue our local implementation of the Mayor's Transport Strategy, which has particular aims with regard to improving accessibility and to clean up London's air. So particularly pushing the case around clean buses and using the Mayor's money supplemented by our own to improve public transport accessibility, particularly accessible bus stops, but also to lobby for further improvements nationally and locally around the Access for All scheme, for example, funded by the Department for Transport. So we continue to seek those improvements in sustainable public transport. Just particularly touching upon Councillor Ryan's points around cycle infrastructure. One of the benefits that Waltham Forest and Kingston have is the Mini Holland scheme funded by the Mayor, which granted them hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds to improve that infrastructure. We bid, but unfortunately we weren't successful. But with that sort of money we can make a much more significant step change in cycling infrastructure. But we continue to pursue any sources of funds available to ensure that we have all possibly available public transport options alongside the steps that we're asking members to take in this report.
Thank you. I'd also just like to thank the Cabinet Member and Director for the contributions. As the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Housing Transport, I would also add it's about promoting more sustainable forms of public transport or motor transport, including walking and cycling. And at the weekend, I attended the opening of the segregated walkway, cycleway between Rains Park and New Morden. We want to obviously see more of these in the borough. Obviously, we didn't receive any Holland funding, but there is opportunities through funds like Liverpool Neighbourhood Funds. I'd just also like to draw Cabinet members' attention to obviously the supplementary agenda. There's an updated equalities impact assessment within the report. Do any Cabinet members have any further questions they would like to ask? Yes.
I'm just wondering, Chris, how do we compare to other boroughs? Because I know poor air quality is not just happening in Merton. How do we compare in terms of, you have, for example, saying that 60% due to traffic, and I know they're dealing with at 60%. They also have ways of dealing with other 40%. But how do we compare generally or in any aspect with other boroughs?
I think it's broadly comparable to the rest of London. I don't think there are any parts of London that have good air quality. There are areas of much poorer air quality. I know that Putney High Street has such air quality, which is being improved to a limited extent through the improvements in the bus fleet. That was particularly poor air quality for those who have some problems we're facing. But we're broadly comparable to the rest of London.
Just quickly, I think in terms of the Equality Act, which came into existence in 2010, we need to keep an open eye and then look at the improvement which has been made, and if there are any adjustments, what are your views on that? Because I mean, obviously, obviously I monitor the Equality Act all the time if I'm looking at cases in court, and I want to make sure that you make the right decision, otherwise you will be sued. So what is the council do in terms of making improvement and adjustments?
So the EIA sets out the potential impact and the improvement action plan, and we propose to keep that under review to monitor the impact of this policy and to bring forward to members any recommendations should we identify any that need to be brought forward.
Thank you. Can I take this opportunity, well, thanking the work officers, Chris Lee, Ben Stevens, Captain all the officers in ENR who've been involved in this comprehensive report, but also as well the public health team, Dagmar and Jason Andrews in air quality. It's been an incredibly detailed and comprehensive report. It is clear that quality of air quality is one of the biggest issues facing this borough, and it is proposed to take tough and radical measures, but we do need to know that there is a climate emergency out there, and as a council I think we are duty bound to address that. So are the recommendations agreed by Cabinet? Agreed. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Ryan, for your contribution. We move on now to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the Scrutiny Task Group review of road safety around schools. And I am going to invite Councillor Peter Southgate and Helen Forbes, who's the parent government rep and chair of the task group, to address Peter and Helen.
Thank you, Chair. We're pleased to have the opportunity to introduce this report and also to introduce members of Cabinet to Helen Forbes, who, as one of our co-opted members of the Scrutiny Commission, may not be known to all of you. Helen, in fact, chaired this particular review, and I think it's going to be the last appearance. Yes, sadly we're losing her, but she's done some very useful piece of work here. I was on the task group, and it comes to a number of, I think, not earth-shattering, but useful conclusions and ways in which we can improve the environment of road safety around the schools.
Thank you. So yes, our task group looked at ways to improve the school journey for children. We kept in mind the wider policy context and looked at examples of good practice in other authorities. We called widely for evidence and heard from local residents, parents, schools and officers, and our evidence is summarised in the appendices. We'd like Cabinet to consider accepting our recommendations set out at pages 166 to 169. I just wanted to say a quick word about STARS, which I've realised isn't defined within our report. It's an acronym: Sustainable Travel, Active, Responsible, Safe. It's a TfL accreditation scheme, which is facilitated by local authority officers, whereby schools do 3 things: create a travel plan, select suitable activities, and reach active travel targets. The Council's Traffic and Highways officers encourage schools to join, but there are a number of schools, I think 43, we say in the report, who don't currently participate, and we therefore came up with recommendations 2 to 5 to address this. So thank you. Any questions?
So thank you for your report. As Cabinet member, this is something that I know comes up quite often as a former Cabinet member for education, and now undertaking the transport brief. We know that the issue of road safety is something that is of concern, especially in terms of some of the parking outside schools, but also as well the traffic issues. We've just touched on our last report in terms of air pollution and air quality, and the Council is looking at piloting recommendation 14 temporary road restrictions outside schools, so in the process of bringing forward a report on Leeds, St Thomas of Canterbury, Harris Academy, Primary Academy of Bollards Hill, and Singlegate, if issues can be clarified, with TfL restricting traffic. We've also got to be much more proactive in terms of enforcement outside schools, especially people parking on waiting restrictions. They cause considerable danger to pedestrians in terms of safety, and that's something we have carried out across the borough. Clearly, I think within this report, there's many excellent recommendations. We as Cabinet will obviously bring forward an action plan, but I think it's an issue that we as Cabinet do address quite seriously. We want to see less people using cars to bring their children to school, and actually use those more sustainable forms of public transport, especially things like walking, cycling, coming on public transport. I know for parents it's sometimes not easy, but I know many schools have produced school travel plans, which is excellent. Obviously, we hope that more of them will come forward. And I think it's education can change the behaviour, and actually children themselves can actually change the behaviour of their parents. I just obviously asked the Cabinet Member for Education, Councillor String, is there anything else you'd like to add as the Cabinet Member?
No, other than to say I think this is something I'm particularly interested in as well, and I'm currently going around and visiting lots of schools, and it's something that I'll be asking them about is their concerns about air quality more generally and about road safety in particular. Because I looked, you asked them why not many have gone through the STARS process, and it seems to be an issue of resources and time, so I want to kind of unpack that a bit more and see if there is something else that we can be doing to support them. But thank you very much for the report.
Is there anything that officers would like to ask Chris?
No, I know that colleagues in the department work closely to help the government. It's probably also worth reminding ourselves that our roads are relatively safe around schools, so the sign of a good council is one that's constantly seeking to improve, and that's what this report seeks to do. It's not a sign that we have unsafe roads, they are comparable to others across London, and the measurement of accidents and impacts and so on is relatively low.
Are the recommendations agreed by Cabinet?
Can
Well, thank you very much for attending Cabinet today. We move on to item number 7, and I'd like to invite Rebecca Land to call the Hi Rebecca, thank you for coming to the Cabinet. Can you just obviously, sorry.
I need to comment on this because I do feel that I went to Governor's School Day 2 weeks ago in school. I am absolutely delighted with the Condition 11 because in Lower Morden Lane, a lot of these cars are parked in, in places where there are dog cars. So I think we need to look at that very, very carefully. It's important in areas like Lower Morden. So
thank you for your comment, Councillor Macauley. Sorry about that. We'll move on to item number 8, Councillor Lanning. Agenda item number 7. The report, the transition from children to adult services for children with special educational needs and disability, Scrutiny task group report.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to introduce the final task group report on transitions from children to adult services for young people with special educational needs and disability. And before I touch on the recommendations that I hope Cabinet will be able to support this evening, I want to briefly set out why and how this review came to be. I also hope to explain why, as a task group, we strongly believe these recommendations, which build on the inspiring work that both the Adult Social Care Department and the Children's Department are already doing, hold the potential to be transformative for some of the most vulnerable adults and young people in our borough. Set out the context in June of last year, the Healthy Communities and Older People's Panel agreed to undertake a task group aimed to transition from children to adult services without necessarily predetermining what area would be focused on. But as a task group, we agree that the area of greatest need was transition for young people with special educational needs and disability. And there were a number of reasons that we chose this area. Not only did we choose it because young people with SEND, who represent 15% of children in England, are 7 times more likely to be excluded, twice as likely to experience persistent bullying most days at school, and 4 times more likely to experience mental health problems than their non-SEND peers. Nor did we only choose this area of focus because when these young people reach adulthood, they are twice as likely to be living in poverty, 4 times more likely to be single, and while far less likely to be employed if they do have a job, they were likely to be part-time and poorly paid. And while I hope you'd agree that these are sufficient reasons to explore this area in more detail, there were 3 additional reasons that we did choose this area. Firstly, the recent and significant service change following the 2014 Children and Families Act, and also the associated SEND Code of Practice, the increasing demand for services in Merton, and what was at the start of our review, the upcoming CPC offset inspection, which we appreciate has already taken place while the outcome is yet to be determined. But we hope that still these recommendations will play a role in the continued work that departments are undertaking. As you'll see from the report, we were fortunate enough to speak to a wide range of stakeholders across the national perspective and also local and statutory services, and also, of course, one of the most central stakeholders, the parents of children who have experienced transitions in Merton, all of whom I would like to take this opportunity to thank for giving us their time, insight and varied experience over the course of the review. Moving on to the recommendations themselves, as you'll have the report in front of you, I won't go into these in any detail, but I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to review these recommendations. I do hope that you feel able to support them. Thank you.
As it's shared responsibility, I'll ask Councillor Clifford to come in and Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Rebecca. From my perspective, I know that any period of transition is stressful for any child and their family, but it's particularly so for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Children's Services and Adult Social Care are committed to working together with our partners to take some of the stress and anxiety out of this process, so that the children who access our services go on to achieve their goal
for us in Merton, but also as well in terms of growth in the borough, but also as well addressing our housing needs. As Cabinet is aware, we have had extremely challenging housing targets set by the Mayor of London of 1,400 additional homes a year. We have made representations about that to the Mayor of London, which is being considered in terms of the achievability of those, but also as well in terms of local infrastructure here in Merton, and environmental targets and opportunity areas for growth in terms of businesses. Cabinet is aware we're very ambitious in terms of growing the business space in Wimbledon town centre. So I asked Cabinet to actually agree the recommendations here tonight, and I don't know if there's anything as Clara Butler, who has led on this, Deputy Manager of Future Merton, is there anything you'd like to add to the report? Do members of the Cabinet have any questions they would like to ask? Are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. We move on to the next item on the report, and this is the Neighbourhood Fund. Now, there's not often in Cabinet we have any recommendations in terms of additional areas of expenditure, but tonight we will be considering a number of recommendations being put forward in terms of how we spend community infrastructure levy funding. As Cabinet is aware, we have had this levy now on new developments since 2014, and to date over 3 million has been raised to spent on neighbourhood projects. Some of the SIL money also contributed towards Morden Leisure Centre, and as Cabinet members are aware, that each ward now has up to £5,000 a year, £15,000 to spend in terms of their own neighbourhood ward projects, which I believe is a bonus in terms of actually doing things in our local area, small scale projects, and having the funding available to do that. Tonight we are asking Cabinet to agree over £900,000 in terms of expenditure. One of the key criteria has been bridging the gap between the east and the west of the borough, and you will see that some projects specifically look into that. One of them is the Move More Mitcham, which is 27,800, supporting Common Site Development Trust, £130,000, which is based over in Pollard's Hill, encouraging pupil involvement in the Star School Accreditation Scheme, Dean City Farm, and also as well Polk Theatre in Wimbledon, which does a huge amount of outreach work to the east of the borough. Another part of the proposal relates to Wimbledon Park. As Cabinet aware, this is one of the biggest developments in the borough. So there is a proposal within this in terms of expenditure of Havens Road Parade. Clearly, there's going to be considerable population growth in that area, and it's having that supporting public infrastructure as well to support that. So we are asking Cabinet tonight to approve the recommendations here in this report. Is there anything further you'd like to add, Chris?
Just one point, Chair, just to, I suppose, remind committee that this is one part of the overall CIL monies that the council has available. You've mentioned the ward allocation. The other far more substantial part, 85% of the CIL, is the strategic pot. And related to an earlier item on the agenda, we are working on a proposal to bring forward for members' consideration the allocation of some of that strategic pot for increased street tree planting in order to help mitigate some of the impact of air quality and also to continue to supplement the stock of trees that we have in the borough. But this represents 15% of the CIL. A far larger portion is the strategic allocation.
Is there any questions that Cabinet members would like to ask in relation to this, these recommendations?
No question. With comment, just no question. Just comment to say that I'm very pleased with the fundings, especially to
the mid-2020s before us, and it's to obviously inform members of how the procurement process for the contract worked and the scoring system for the contract as well. So we're asking Cabinet tonight to approve the recommendations here in this report, and I'll ask Chris Lee now to come in terms of highways contract.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Do we have any questions we'd like to ask in terms of the highways contract? Do we approve the recommendations as laid out in this report?
Agreed.
Thank you. We now move on to another agenda item for me is the extension of the contract. The highways contract is due to expire on the 31st of August 2019, and as provided in Contract Standing Orders 27, we are asking for an extension of 6 months so that we can tide over until the start of the new contract takes effect. Clearly, if we don't approve this report tonight, the council will be without a highways contract for that time period. It's more a technical process as we lead ourselves into that new report, and we're therefore asking if Cabinet would approve the recommendations set out in the report. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add as Director?
No, just to point out that it is for up to 6 months, and we don't anticipate that it would be for that duration. It just allows a smooth mobilisation irrespective of the identity of the preferred contractor.
Any questions from members of the Cabinet this evening? Are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 15, which is the floating car club extension. And yet again, this one falls to myself to present. You'll see the recommendations are set out in the report. Agree to launch a Drive Now New Beco car clubs in Merton, agreeing to fix the permit fee for floating car clubs paid to the council at £1,260 per annum for a 3-year period ending in March 2023, agreeing a 20% time limited discounts for electric only vehicles, which is obviously something we do want to encourage more sustainable modes of transport, but also as well giving delegated authority in relation to additional accredited car clubs on Merton. Car clubs are something that has had increasingly popularity within the borough. There is now over 6,000 members and 60 vehicles operating. Initially it was taken up by Zipcar, who launched their flex service in 2017, and following their success is now seeking to expand the numbers within the borough. In terms of car clubs, this is something that obviously I'm supportive of as a Cabinet member. We do hope that more of them are electric vehicles which are being used. zero emissions, but we also as well recognise them as a flexible form of transport for people in the borough, that if they need to use a car occasionally, that they do have access to the car. And it also as well ensures that people don't have to buy a car. There's obviously the running costs of cars, but some people from time to time need to use a car for a variety of tasks. Car clubs, I believe, are a good thing. We hope that they have been growing in Merton, and we hope they grow further as a result of this report. You'll also see as well some details in relation to Civic Flex and Civic, who are two of the additional providers its proposal, but also as well the benefits of car clubs. And I think Councillor Byers in his earlier report touched on air quality and health concerns, which has to be an overriding concern following us passing the climate emergency motion last week. But we know that air quality and emissions is one of the biggest issues facing this borough, so we do want to cut car use, and I believe car clubs are a good way forward of doing that, and hopefully more of them are actually zero emissions. So I formally move the report. Does the Director have any further points they'd like to add? Do you have any further questions? Councillor Thorns first.
I welcome the increase of accessibility to electric cars in the borough. My only concern is we are working on the basis that some of the different initiatives that brought forward to Cabinet this evening are intending to nudge change in behaviours. I see this as one of them, as we nudge people towards greater use of electric cars, perhaps swapping out owning a car for just accessing one of these when needed. But in the light of the fact that nudging behaviours often take a little bit of time, are we going to be monitoring the capacity of parking spaces as these are introduced alongside the behavioural changes in the longer term?
Chris?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, we are, and working with these car club providers in order to ensure that the cars are spread across the sub-region, so that they aren't located in any one borough, taking up a large number of spaces. So we will keep that closely with them.
Massive fan of car clubs, and great particularly for areas like Abbey where I represent. I just have a question which came up. I was speaking to some residents last week about the expansion of car clubs, actually. When some of them raised concerns that some clubs have exclusion criteria on who can use them, like older, above certain ages and so on. I haven't looked into the detail of any of these, but I wondered if that's something that we bear in mind when we're looking at companies who want to introduce car clubs in that area.
I wasn't aware of that, so we'll look into that and see if it is a private sector driven approach, but we'll see what leverage we have in order to ensure that it is accessible as possible.
Are the recommendations set out in the report agreed by Cabinet? Agreed. We've already covered our agenda item number 16, so we move on to the Financial Act 2018-19. So I'd like the Director Caroline to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the draft revenue outturn in front of you tonight, showing a general fund underspend of 7.7 million. We are currently subject to audit, and the results of that audit will be to Sanderson GP Committee next Thursday. We also had some monies back through the business rates pilot, for which we had said throughout the year that we would put that into our personal budget reserve, and that's at the moment anticipated to be 3.8 million. However, that is also subject to returns of all the other local boroughs, and those still to be audited, and the city would like to confirm the amounts available, and then adjustments will be done during the 2019-20 accounts. You will see that it was a bit, we hadn't necessarily forecast such a large underspend. So we do have a section in the report, Appendix 5, as to how we can look to improve the forecasting going forward. We have set out the reserves and what we have done with the underspend and how we've allocated those monies. the increase in some of our transformation funds, our fund for apprentices to go alongside the levy, which we're not allowed to use to fund the salaries of apprenticeships. So certainly something which we're keen to encourage more young apprentices into the borough, certainly working with Rachel and our schools to facilitate that more. So that's certainly something that we're looking to do, as well as we're essentially trying to smooth the challenging financial situation with the delays, potentially in spending review and fair funding review. The report also shows that for the first time ever we actually have a deficit on our dedicated schools grant, and that is something that I think you will see then in the monitoring report, which is our data, that is certainly something that's not going away in the short term. We are raising that as an issue with ministers and government officials to see what can be done around additional funding in this area, and certainly working with colleagues, particularly in the southwest London region and also other London colleagues and across the country, because this is not a massive issue. There's certainly information on our capital outturn and underspends and slippage, and request for you to agree the slippage to be brought forward into 2019-20, and some monies have been given back where it's no longer required to make sure that we are effective as possible in the use of capital spend. So whilst the capital spend was less than we had originally forecast, we had been more pessimistic as to the outturn around the funding. So funding-wise, we're practically spot on. So there is little additional benefit to us in 1920. So we have actually facilitated that spend into future years. We have also, for the first time, attached as Appendix 7 the narrative statement which sits alongside the accounts. So not quite as graphic as the Children and Young People's Plan which we had presented earlier. It is a different approach that we've taken to try and make it more easy read and understandable for people. And that's certainly something when we brought it to CLT for them to have a view on. They certainly found it easier than some of the information that we had given previously. So we're hoping, with everything that's going forward, that we will take a clean bill account of the accounts. There may be some issues outstanding with some housing benefit claims in relation to some issues that we had with our system, and we're just waiting for the DWP and we want to clarify the extent of me, but happy to take any questions you may have.
Do members of the Cabinet have any questions they'd like to ask the Director? Is that our recommendations agreed? We now move on to agenda number item 18, financial monitoring reports, which is on page 505. So that's Caroline Holland, you see.
Thank you. So if you the two reports alongside each other, one with an underspend of 7.7 million and now one with an overspend of 1.2 at the end of month 2. So we're working closely with departmental colleagues to see how we got this information right, bearing in mind some of the issues that arose in 2018-19 to make sure any ongoing opportunities are taken into account. However, you will see the main area of our overspend is again children's services. So we'll be doing some work in that area to see the drivers behind that, what can be done. I think over the medium to long term, I'm not sure that anything can be done in the short term, but we have also attached the progress on savings for 1920. So this is the first time we were seeing people's assumptions as to how the savings that were brought forward as part of previous council reports are being delivered, and also the update on the outturn of the 18-19 savings, where they've short what's been done for 1920 and how they're being addressed. If there are some fundamental issues in addressing those savings, then that will be the first point of call when directors will come forward with their savings to look to find new savings to swap those out, and that will come forward in due course if there are any in that situation. Again, we have some new capital agreed schemes for you to approve, the amendments, some reprofiling and some additional funding that's come forward, and also some environments between certain service areas, as well as we had some requests for transfer of reserves from our Merton transformation funds, which are over the limit that I can really approve. So again, that's been put forward for the cabinet to approve in this instance. So again, happy to take any questions.
Just obviously before we go, I want to mention the environments. It's proposing a number of environments here in relation, some of them are in relation to the Air Quality Action Plan 2018-13, contributions towards projects to promote long-term sustainable public transport provision in council-managed car parks. Obviously, we'll discuss this earlier in the agenda tonight, which includes provision of charging points for electric vehicle, cycle storage, pedestrian safety, and help points across all relevant car parks. Approve the release of the 100,000 that was set aside in relation to demolition or battle close, which I'm glad to say the demolition has actually now been completed. You'll see 181,000 in relation to scanning and digital archiving of files, and also the release from the outstanding council capital programme of 152,000 related to project management and 149,200 relating to post go live. You'll also see at the bottom, obviously a very large item, environment for 631,000 from the Vulnerable Children's Social Work Team to Safeguarding and Care Planning Team 6, and environment for 102,000 from Children Education Grant Reserve to Social Care Budget. Do members of the Cabinet have any points or anything they would like to raise further? So does Cabinet agree the recommendations set out in the report and also the budget requirements? They agreed by Cabinet. And that concludes the business of the Cabinet meeting tonight. We discussed